Hello and welcome again to the Bible study on the book of Romans. We are on session 2 looking at Romans chapter 11, and we were looking at verses 7 through 11. And just to kind of break it down, because God hardened Jews so that they could not come to a place of truth, salvation came to Gentiles in order to make them jealous, in order to get them to turn back to Him. So let's continue in verses 12 through 15. Now, if their transgression is riches for the world, and their failure is riches for the Gentiles, how much more will their fulfillment be? But I'm speaking to you who are Gentiles. Inasmuch then as I am an apostle of Gentiles, I magnify my ministry, if somehow I might move to jealousy my fellow countrymen and save some of them. For if their rejection is the reconciliation of the world, what will their acceptance be but life from the dead? This is about the beauty of God's plan. Yes, they were and are His beloved. And yes, through their continued disobedience and stubbornness, the rest of the world has this opportunity that brings the greatest riches known to man, and that is to be in God's family. But the fulfillment of God's promise still remains for them. And as a Gentile believer, we need to see this gift not as their punishment, but as our redemption. Paul, an Israelite himself, desires that through his ministry to the Gentiles, to bring as many Jews as possible into the fulfillment of the promise made to Abraham. And through the growth of the Gentile believers, he hopes that it will result in saving his fellow Israelites, being a tool for God to bring about what God had intended. Now, if God is so merciful that He is using their rejection to offer reconciliation to the world, imagine how much He will accept them back from death to life. Is this real physical death, or is this spiritual death? Truthfully, God being God, it could be either one. Then he continues in verses 16 through 18. If the first piece of dough is holy, the lump is also. And if the root is holy, the branches are too. But if some of the branches were broken off, and you, being a wild olive, were grafted in among them, and became partakers with them of the rich fruit of the olive tree, do not be arrogant towards the branches. But if you are arrogant, remember that it is not you who supports the root, but the root supports you. Plain and simple, this completely destroys the mentality that the church has replaced Israel. First, the church is Jew and Gentile at this moment in time. Israel is considered holy, and yes, God has broken some of them off, and when He did, He took us, the wild olive, and grafted us in among them. And Israel is the root of our faith. We rely on them. We become a part of them. And so anyone who thinks they are better than them is wrong. Because without that root, we have no faith. People are fine claiming Jesus as Savior, but ignore, or worse yet, become anti-Jewish and are in serious error. Let's continue in verses 19 through 22. You will say then, branches were broken off so that I might be grafted in. Quite right. They were broken off for their unbelief. But you stand by your faith. Do not be conceited, but fear. For if God did not spare the natural branches, He will not spare you either. Behold, the kindness and severity of God. To those who fell, severity. But to you, God's kindness. If you continue in His kindness. Otherwise, you also will be cut off. You see, Paul clarified what I just said. Do not look at their being broken off in the wrong attitude. And so we came to a believing faith, but do not allow that faith to place ourselves on a pedestal over and above them. The very fact that God was severe enough to be willing to make them His beloved fall should keep us in a state of fear and gratitude. Yes, He is being kind to the Gentiles, but if, and I mean if, which means we may not, because if we don't continue in His kindness, We will be cut off. And yet, how many sermons have you heard on that? Another clear distinction that the idea of once saved, always saved is not true. It simply states a completely lack of godly wisdom. If we don't understand our position within Israel, the danger is becoming high and mighty, but it will be to our detriment. Okay, I'm going to stop this lesson here, and please think about this, ponder this, because there's some deep truths that we as believers really need to walk in and understand. And I'm going to finish Romans chapter 11 tomorrow with 2 more lessons. Thanks for being here. Catch me on the next one, and thanks again for being here.